Cha-Cha and I have just come back from her bath. It is very bright in here. So, as I was saying, Cha-Cha and I have just come back from her bath. She has visited the room of rain, which she does not like to do. So now she will have her dinner, and I will read to her. What are we on? I believe it is part 4. It is part 4 of The Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen. So, Gerda had to have another rest. Hopping about in the snow, in front of where she sat was a big crow who had been watching her for some time and waggling his head. Now he greeted her. "Caw, caw, how do, how do?" And that was the best he could manage. But he wanted to help the girl, and he asked where she was going, alone in the wide, wide world. Alone. How well Gerda understood that word and what it meant. So she told the whole story of her life to the crow and asked whether he had seen Kay. The crow nodded thoughtfully and said, "Maybe I have, maybe I have." "Oh, do you think you have?" cried the girl, nearly squeezing him to death as she kissed him. Now then, said the crow, "I think it was Kay, but by this time he will certainly have forgotten you for the princess." "Does he live with a princess?" asked Gerda. "Yes, just listen," said the crow, "but I find it difficult to speak your language. Can you understand crow language? I could tell it better in that." "No, I've never learned it," said Gerda, "but Granny can, and parrot language too. I do wish I could." "Never mind," said the crow. "I'll tell you as best as I can, though it won't be too good, I'm afraid." And then he told her what he knew. "In the kingdom where we are now lives a princess who is tremendously clever. She has read all the newspapers there are in the world and forgotten them again. She's as clever as that. The other day, she was sitting on the throne, and there's not much fun in that, so I'm told, when she happened to hum a little song that runs like this. 'Why shouldn't I have a husband?' Well, there's something to be said for that," she thought. So she made up her mind to marry, but she wanted a husband who would speak up for himself when spoken to, who wouldn't just stand and look distinguished, for that's so very dull. Then she rang for all her court ladies, and when they heard what she meant to do, they were delighted. "How splendid," they all said. "That's just what we were thinking the other day." "Believe me," added the crow, "every word I say is true. I've got a tame sweetheart who has free run of the palace, and she told me the whole story." Of course, his sweetheart was also a crow, for birds of a feather flock together. The newspapers at once came out with a border of hearts and the princess's monogram. You could read for yourself that any good-looking young man was free to come up to the palace and talk to the princess, and the one who spoke so that you felt he was quite at home there and was the best talker, he was the one the princess meant to marry. "You can take my word for it," said the crow. "It's as true as I sit here. People came in throngs. There was jostling and hustling, but every one of them failed, both on the first day and on the second. They were all good talkers out in the street, but as soon as they came to the palace and saw the guards in silver at the entrance and the lackeys in gold on the stairs and the glitter of the great lighted halls, they became flurried, and when they stood before the throne where the princess was sitting, they could do nothing but repeat her last remark. Let's not light your towel on fire. And she had no desire to hear that again. It was just as though people in there had been dosed with snuff, which had half sent them to sleep, until they came out into the street again. Then, of course, they were perfect chatterboxes. There was a long line of them. Excuse me. Stretching from the town gate to the palace. "I saw it all myself," said the crow. "They soon became hungry and thirsty, but from the palace they never received so much as a glass of tepid water. A few of the wiser ones, it's true, had brought sandwiches with them, but they weren't going to share them with a rival. They thought to themselves, no harm in him looking hungry, then the princess won't have him." "But Kay," asked Gerda, "when did he come? Was he one of all those suitors?" "All right, give me time. We're just coming to him. It was on the 3rd day. Up came a little chap without horse or carriage, stepping out as bold as you please, straight to the palace. His eyes were bright like yours, and he had fine thick hair, but apart from that, he was shabbily dressed. That was Kay, cried Gerda. Oh, then I found him at last. And she clapped her hands joyfully. He had a little rucksack, said the crow. Oh, I expect that was his toboggan, said Gerda, for he took one away with him. Quite possibly, said the crow. I didn't look at it at all closely, but I know from my tame sweetheart that when he came to the palace and saw the bodyguard in silver at the entrance and the lackeys in gold on the stairs, he wasn't in the least put out. He just gave them a nod and said how dull it must be standing on the stairs. He preferred to go inside. Cha-Cha, I feel like this is not giving us enough warmth. There we go. There the rooms were blazing with light. Privy councillors and ambassadors were going about in bare feet carrying gold dishes. It was all very grand. His boots squeaked most terribly, but that didn't worry him in the slightest. I'm sure that must be Kay, said Gerda. I know he had new boots on because I heard them squeaking in Granny's room. Well, they certainly did squeak, said the crow, and he went boldly up to the princess, who was sitting on a pearl as big as a spinning wheel. All the ladies in waiting with their maids and their maids' maids, and all the gentlemen in waiting with their footmen and their footmen's footmen who have pages, stood lined up all round, and the nearer they stood to the door, the haughtier they looked. The footman's page, who always wears slippers, stands so proudly in the doorway that one can hardly bear to look at him. How dreadful, said Gerda. And do you mean to say that Kay has won the princess? If I hadn't been a crow, I should have taken her myself, even though I'm engaged. He is said to have spoken as well as I speak when I speak crow language, so my tame sweetheart informs me. He was bold and attractive. He hadn't in the least come to woo the princess, but merely in order to listen to her wise conversation. He liked her, and she liked him. Why, of course it was Kay, said Gerda. He was always so clever. He could do mental arithmetic with fractions. Oh, do please take me into the palace. Easier said than done, said the crow. I must talk to my tame sweetheart about it. I dare say she can advise us, for I may as well tell you that a little girl like you will never be allowed right in. Yes, I shall, said Gerda. As soon as Kay hears I am there, he'll come straight out and fetch me. Wait for me by that fence, said the crow with a waggle of his head, and away he flew. It was after dark before he got back. Rah, rah, he cawed. I'm to give you her love, and here's a small loaf for you that she found in the kitchen. They've plenty of bread there, and you must be hungry. You can't possibly be allowed into the palace in those bare feet of yours. The guards in silver and the lackeys in gold would never let you through. But don't cry. You shall get in all right. My sweetheart knows of a little back stair leading to the bedroom, and she knows where to find the key. Then they went into the garden along the great avenue where the leaves were coming down one after another, and as one after another the lights of the palace were going out, the crow took Gerda round to a back door that stood ajar. Gerda's heart went pit-a-pat with fear and longing. It was just as though she were going to do something wrong, and yet she only wanted to know if this was Kay. Why, of course it must be him. In her mind she had a living picture of his thick hair, his intelligent eyes, and she could see how plainly how he smiled, just as he used to smile when they sat together at home among the roses. She knew how glad he would be to see her, and to hear what a long way she had come for his sake, and how sad they all were at home, when he never returned. Now they had reached the foot of the stairs, where there was a small lamp burning on a shelf. In the middle of the floor stood the tame crow, turning her head this way and that to look at Gerda, who curtsied, just as Granny had taught her. My betrothed has spoken nicely of you, my dear young lady, said the tame crow. Your biography, as they call it, is really most touching. If you will take the lamp, I will lead the way. Straight ahead is our best way, so as not to meet anyone. I feel as if we were being followed, said Gerda, and something whizzed past her that looked like shadows on the wall, horses with tossing manes and scraggy legs, huntsmen, and ladies and gentlemen on horseback. They're dreams, that's all, said the tame crow. They come and fetch their highnesses of thoughts away to hunting. That's a good thing, for now you'll be able to take a longer look at them while they're asleep. But promise me that, if ever you are raised to honor and dignity, you will show a thankful heart. That might better have been left unsaid, said the wild crow. But now they had got to the first room, where the walls were hung with rose-colored satin worked with flowers. Here the dreams were already whizzing past so quickly that Gerda hadn't time to see if their highnesses were among them. Each room was more magnificent than the last. It was really quite staggering. At length they found themselves in the bedchamber. The ceiling in there was like a great palm tree with leaves of glass, precious glass, and over the middle of the floor from a thick stem hung 2 beds that looked just like lilies. One of them was white, and the princess was sleeping in that one. The other was red, and it was there that Gerda was to look for Kay. She turned back one of the red leaves and caught sight of a brown neck. It was Kay! She called out his name quite loudly, holding the lamp close to him. The dreams whirled into the room again on horseback. He woke up, turned his head, and it wasn't little Kay at all. The prince was only like him in the neck, but he was certainly young and handsome. Meanwhile, the princess peeped out from the white lily bed and asked what was happening. Gerda burst into tears and told her whole story and all that the crows had done for her. "You poor dear," said the prince and princess, and they praised the 2 crows and told them they weren't a bit angry with them, but they mustn't do it again. As it was, they should receive a reward. "Would you prefer to fly about on your own," asked the princess, "or be given a permanent place as court crows with all the scraps from the kitchen?" Both crows curtsied and asked for a permanency. They had an eye to the time when they would be getting on in years, and they said it was best to have something laid by for a rainy day. The prince got up and let Gerda have his bed to sleep in. He couldn't do more than that. She folded her little hands, thinking how kind people and birds are, then shut her eyes and went peacefully to sleep. All the dreams came flying back again, and this time they looked like angels from heaven. They were pulling a little sledge, and on it sat Kay, nodding to her. But the whole thing was only a dream, and so it vanished as soon as she woke up. The next day, she was dressed from head to foot in silken velvet. She was invited to stay on at the palace and enjoy herself, but all she asked for was a simple horse and carriage and a pair of boots, and she would drive out into the wide world and find Kay. She was given both boots and muff, and also the most charming clothes, and as she was ready to leave, there at the door was a new coach of pure gold with the royal arms gleaming on its sides like a star. Coachman, footmen, and outriders, for there were outriders as well, all wore gold crowns. The prince and the princess themselves helped her into the carriage and wished her every good fortune. The wild crow, who was now married, went with Gerda for the first dozen miles, sitting beside her, as he couldn't bear riding with his back to the horses. The other crow stood in the gateway flapping her wings. She didn't go with them, because she suffered from headaches since getting a permanent place and too much to eat. The inside of the coach was lined with sugar twists, and the seat was stuffed with ginger nuts and jujubes. "Goodbye, goodbye," cried the prince and princess. Gerda wept, and the crow wept, and so they drove for some miles. Then it was the crow's turn to say goodbye, and that was the saddest parting of all. He flew up into a tree and flapped his black wings as long as he could still see the coach, glittering there like the clearest sunshine. I'm going to put this book away for tonight. You can find it on the internet on our website, which is www.readingroomcle.org, or wherever books are sold. I'm going to take this shivering dog and wrap her in a blanket and give her a different dinner that is not so chilly. And I will bring her tomorrow night to read the rest of Part 5 of The Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen. In the meantime, keep reading.